Hey everybody, I'm really glad you found Suncrest Messages. I do hope you'll take a minute to subscribe to either our podcast or our YouTube channel. And you can also download the Suncrest app. There's great stuff there that goes far beyond these messages. Either way, I hope that the next 30 minutes helps you integrate faith with your life. Enjoy.
It's great to be with all of you. It's drawing 2020 to a close, which is nice, and celebrating Christmas together. And I'm really glad that we get to do it together. Listen, every time we gather for Christmas, I know we have a couple of different audiences here. Some of you call Suncrest home, and it is so great to see you and be together in person with you to worship. And many times, of course, we have guests on Christmas Eve. And if you're a guest tonight, I want you to know I'm absolutely thrilled that you're here. I hope you feel welcome in every way. You know, when people walk through our doors, they come with all kinds of different perspectives. Some people are people who think, faith just doesn't make sense to me, or I don't have a church home, or I'm just left kind of bewildered by 2020. And if that's your story, I just want you to know you're welcome here, and I hope you'll come back in 2021. We do this every weekend in ways where we try to help people understand how faith and life really fit together. So I hope that you'll come. You know, one of the things about Christmas season is that it seems like things go really fast, but in a certain way, they also slow down. And it's actually in this season that we take in some things that tend to just fly by in other parts of the year. For some of us, that's relationships that are renewed. For others, it's a divine experience like you might even have tonight. For a lot of people, it's the idea that our memories live just a little closer to the surface at Christmas. Now, for me, this will be the 6th Christmas I've had since my dad passed away. And I know that some of you have lost people that you loved even this year. I want you to know we'd walk through a difficult season with you. There's no way to have this season without some unique sadness. And I'll just speak from my experience that 6 years later, the sadness that comes with the season actually hasn't really gone away at all. What has happened is that the memories that mark joyful things have come in line right beside that. And I hope that that's your experience over time as well. One of the memories that I have of my dad is that he would give myself and my brothers all kinds of great experiences. He would take us on the best vacations. We'd go eat at the greatest restaurants. We all love sports, so we'd go to the Ryder Cup together. We went to the World Series together. And one time he called me and he said, "Greg, if you can get to Florida, I have a ticket with your name on it in turn 4 of the Daytona 500. And I thought, that sounds kind of cool. I'm not actually a NASCAR person. I think it was ruined for me a little bit by a few over-the-top, weird, obnoxious NASCAR people who made me have a certain perception of the sport. But I got to tell you, it was my dad and it was Daytona, so I was there. We were 8 rows off the track, and I will never forget the first time all those machines came around turn 4. I mean, the roar was overwhelming. You could feel it inside of you. It was something that I can't even describe and that you couldn't sustain. You couldn't hold on to that experience. Now, why do I tell you that story about the Daytona 500, especially on Christmas, right? Well, there's a few options. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the cinematic masterpiece known as Talladega Nights. You know that one? Yeah, I mean, Ricky Bobby did pray to 8-pound, 6-ounce newborn infant Jesus, so cuddly and yet omnipotent. But that's not the direction we're going tonight. I actually tell you that story for a couple of other reasons. What it makes me think about is that the up-close experience I had with those cars really mattered. And there's something about being up close that changes everything. And I think one of the things that happens at Christmas is a lot of us will open ourselves up to an up-close experience with God. In fact, I want to ask you to open yourself up to it this Christmas and maybe even tonight. A time when His power and His presence can just flood into you. And listen, you won't be able to sustain that feeling. That's not the way it works. God is always near, but we're not constantly having mountaintop experiences. You couldn't handle them if you did. But there is a sense that if we open ourselves to it and we get up close to this story, something changes inside of us. And then I think the other idea that hits me is, just as a few weird, obnoxious NASCAR fans almost kept me from having an authentic experience at the race, I run into a lot of people who are kept away from an authentic experience with God because they know some weird, obnoxious Christians. And trust me, I know they're out there. And many times what happens is if you run in those circles, you get actually a caricature of what God is like rather than the real thing. And I think when you get an up-close experience that I hope you'll have this Christmas, it can dispose of the caricature. Now, I want to start by showing you 3 pictures tonight. Kids, you're going to love this, but honestly, the adults are going to love this too. The idea behind these pictures is that sometimes we see things and then we see it in a new way and we can't unsee it. So you all recognize this, right? Kentucky Fried Chicken. This is Colonel Sanders up there. There he is. Now, I overheard essentially a conversation between a husband and a wife a couple weeks ago where the husband was talking about Colonel Sanders' bow tie in this picture. And the wife said, "That's not a bow tie. Those are his arms and legs." Yeah. You see that? I mean, they're not his arms and legs. We're clear on that, right? It is a bow tie. But now, every time you drive past KFC and you see this, you're going to be like, arms and legs. Once you see it, you can't really unsee it, right? Let me try a Christmas one on you. This is a beautiful picture of a manger scene sitting outside somebody's house. And if you look at it, you, of course, probably think that's Mary and Joseph, kind of adoring the Christ child. But if you look a little closer, you might be able to see 2 dinosaurs about to devour the Christ child. Does that seem sacrilegious to you? I mean, you can see it, right? And actually, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now this next one's my favorite because some of you are very into classical art. And this is a classical art piece. It's beautiful. There's a lot of detail to it, a lot of interpretation to be had. It's a Christmas piece. Mary and baby Jesus, the Madonna, right? But if you look just above Mary's head, you're going to have to convince me that is not the Cookie Monster right there. And now, someday, you're going to walk into a museum in a very classy place, and you're going to be like, Cookie Monster. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is one of the things I want you to think about with Christmas, is that you may have a certain perspective about who God is, and I think Christmas can correctly adjust that perspective in a way that when you see it, then you can't unsee it. And here's the perspective I think a lot of people have. Many people perceive that God relates to us with essentially a performance mindset. You know how this goes. A lot of people think this way. If you're good, then God's good with you. You behave, and he'll bless you. You mess up, and you might be in trouble. And then, just to tangle it up with a little extra power, we attach it to all eternity. And you get this idea. Some people believe this, that if you're a good person, you'll live forever in heaven with God. But if you've done some bad things, especially if you've done something really bad, then watch out for all eternity. Now, what if I told you, hear me out, that perspective about who God is a complete misunderstanding? And what if I told you that the Christmas story of Jesus breaking through to earth is actually what will help us see the accurate picture of Jesus and of God in a way that we can't unsee? Now, we're Americans, right? So we get the performance thing. It's almost instinctive to us. We know all about many of you are successful. Carrots and sticks and performance reviews and merit increases and grades and all those things. And that's great in the workplace. But if you take that and you start to try to apply that mindset to all parts of life and to God, it will mess you up. I mean, some of you had parents that treated you like this. And it's not cool. I mean, maybe you had a dad or a mom who his love for you was entirely based on how well you were doing. If you were succeeding, if you were getting good grades, if you got the job that you wanted, if you were getting the awards, then he loved you. But if you were failing, if you were messing up, if something else was wrong, the communication was clear. His love and acceptance was dependent on your performance. If you had that kind of dad, I'm sorry. And you should really pay attention to make sure you don't then pass that kind of relationship on to the people who are around you. But a lot of you had a great dad. The kind of dad who, yes, would celebrate with you whenever you achieved something awesome, but would also, maybe even more so, make sure you knew he was with you when you were failing, when it wasn't working out, when you lost the game or she broke up with you or whatever it was. And he was with you. This was the kind of dad who would forgive you for anything. I mean anything, as long as you were honest about it. And the primary way that you would think about this dad is no matter what happened, he just wanted to make sure that you knew he was with you. This was not a dad who had a ladder you needed to climb so that you could then grace his presence. It was a dad who would get down on his knees to play with you, to be with you, who would come in to your world. And I think that's the story of Christmas. See, 2,000 years ago, on a night outside of a little hick village called Bethlehem, in the most humble of circumstances, God sent his son into this very broken world. This world is not the way that God wants it to be. But by sending his son into the world, he was communicating to us that he wanted to be with us no matter what. And there weren't, glorious things. This is a story of blue-collar shepherds and teenage parents and a Christ child who was laid to rest in a feeding trough. And ultimately, two of the guys who would write the story of Jesus later on wanted to make sure we captured the essence of why Jesus came. One of the guys, his name is Matthew. He wrote one of the biographies that we have in the Bible. And Matthew, actually, when he first encountered Jesus as an adult, his life was totally messed up. And his encounter with Jesus was to be welcomed into a meal because Jesus wanted to be with him. And then it changed and transformed and redeemed the life of Matthew. And when Matthew writes his Christmas story, he chooses what to include, and he includes this statement from the heavens. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, I want to ask everybody in this room for a moment to get down close to the track, to lean into this idea about Christmas. The story of Christmas is God with us. God who is perfect, us who are far from it. And his desire is to be present, to be with you. There was a different guy named Luke who wrote down one of the other biographies of Jesus that we have in the scriptures. If you read the beginning of Luke's biography, he kind of notes that he was a doctor, he's a physician, but he went on a journey to investigate everything about Jesus so he could write an orderly account of it. And I think the thing that blew Luke away is what he mentions in this heavenly announcement of Christmas night. The angel said, "Do not be afraid." That God up in heaven, he's doing something tonight, and he's going to help you understand that you don't have to live in fear of him. Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. And this Christmas, I want to invite you to get up close with that reality. That when Christ came into the world, it was good news that will cause anyone who's open to it great joy. Joy is not happiness. They are not the same. Happiness, your happiness goes up or down based on what's happening in your life. But joy is different. Joy is something that's with you that transcends all your circumstances. And that's what God brings to you. And it's for all the people. Nobody in this room is left out. Nobody on planet Earth is left out. It's for the high and the lowly. It's for the sinners and the saints. It's for me, and it is for you. And I want you to know that tonight. Because Christ coming into this world, it will reframe who God is. See, Christ coming means that God doesn't want something from us. If that's the way you saw the picture of God before, tonight's the night to see it in a way that you can no longer unsee it. God doesn't want something from you. God wants something for you. That's who he is. And he brought it to be with you. Christ coming means that there's nothing you can do to make God love you more. And actually, there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. God's love for you does not ebb and flow based on your performance. It doesn't. God is love. And there's a peace in that. Christ coming means that God is the good Father. He's the one who will love you no matter what. He's the one that wants you to come home. In fact, he's actually, this is the story of Christmas, the one who will come and find you and bring you home. And Christ coming, ultimately, I think, means that we can rest. That you could just let God be God. I'm all for taking the responsibility that you have. But what is this thing inside of us that has to control everything, that has to engineer every outcome? What is this part of us that thinks we have to white knuckle it and own all the stress and that all the outcomes are up to us? See, part of the message of Christmas is that the biggest things in life, among the biggest things of life, so much of life is actually just beyond our control. And the right posture before the God of the universe is to surrender it to him. See, I don't know if you've noticed this, but you can't change your spouse. And you can't tell the doctor that she's wrong when she says that your dad has cancer. And you couldn't slow down the virus, and you can't speed up the vaccine, and you couldn't prevent the tragedies that have happened to your family, and you're not going to be able to cope with them by going to the bottle or the refrigerator or the boats or anything else. That stuff is out of our control. You can't save your kids from the choices that they've made. And while you may be a successful person, by whatever definition you use for that, you have some wealth, or you have some notoriety. One of the things about chasing wealth and notoriety and success and then getting it is the firm realization that it didn't result in love. That desire to love and be loved, that inner peace that we all want but seems so elusive, it's not attained that way. The chance to experience true joy, it's actually not in our control. And last but not least, I hope that you don't make the greatest miscalculation ever, so that when you stand before God one day, you think that by telling him about your good deeds and charitable acts, he now owes you heaven. Because that is not how it works. You couldn't earn it. You couldn't save yourself. There's no amount of good deeds that causes you to deserve the presence of God. And in many ways, that is the story of Christmas. It's an acknowledgement that we can't save ourselves, that we're not in control, that God wants to be with us, and our opportunity is to let God be God and welcome him and experience him in our lives. This is how Matthew wrote it. This is Christmas. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus. This Jesus who came into the world as both human and divine. The Jesus who walked the earth and felt what we feel and lived like we lived. The Jesus who went to the cross and did for us what we could not do for ourselves. The Jesus who rose from the dead and conquered death so that he would live forever and we could live with him. This Jesus. Call him Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. So I'm going to ask you to be quiet just for the next minute. And if you're open to it, just get up close to this story this year. To feel the authentic power of it. To maybe even whisper words to God and say, this Christmas, I'm going to let you be God. And I trust you because of Jesus. Will you just reflect with me for a minute together before we sing?
Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.